In this video, we're going to be going over Chapter 12, talking about motivation and the various theories and things that we can do as far as helping folks get motivated. Now, motivation is really important. And the reason is because how else are you going to make sure that things are actually getting done, that people are really focused on what it is that they're doing, you're achieving the goals of the organization. There are various psychological processes that go along with it. You have your personal factors. Things like our emotions and attitudes, our values, our work attitudes. And then you have contextual factors that impact motivation. Things like group norms. What kinds of rewards are provided? What kind of values and culture does your organization have? It's very important in that you think about what types of rewards are you providing. You can provide extrinsic or intrinsic rewards. Extrinsic are coming from outside the person. It's something that somebody else does, basically, for someone else. Intrinsic is internal to the person. In other words, what somebody feels about what it is that they're doing. Now, one of the things I disagree with the book on, it talks about what are you doing to motivate somebody else. I disagree with that. I firmly believe that I cannot motivate anyone to do anything. All I can do is set an environment so that people can motivate themselves. Motivation has to come from within the person. It's not something I can do. All I can do is set that environment, set the situation so that somebody else can be motivated, maybe to come work for you and stay at your organization, maybe do extra for your organization. So again, when I use these terms, I am saying to help somebody get motivated or something along those lines. I am not saying I'm going to motivate somebody to do something. Now, there's several different perspectives and the different types of theories. You have content, process, job design, and reinforcement theories that go along with motivation. Now, let's look at the content theories. Content theories are primarily looking at the idea of needs. The whole idea behind this is unmet needs motivate. Unmet needs motivate. So in other words, if somebody has something that's important to them as far as what they need, in other words, they want to be with other people or something along those lines, that will motivate them to do something, to try to fill in that unmet need. There's basically four theories. You have Maslow's needs hierarchy, McClelland's acquired needs, Deci and Ryan's self-determination, and Herzberg's two-factor theory. Everybody's familiar with Maslow's needs hierarchy. All right, Abraham Maslow came up with this back in the 40s, I think it was. And basically he said that there are five levels of needs. You have your physiological, safety, love or relationships, esteem, and self-actualization. Physiological is making sure that your physical types of things are satisfied. Food, air, water, that sort of thing. His theory was basically saying once these needs have been met, then you are motivated to satisfy the next level. So once your physiological needs are met, then you're motivated to satisfy safety needs. In other words, having a roof over your head, avoiding violence, things like that. Once those needs are met, then you are motivated to satisfy the next level up. In other words, you want to be with people. You want to be loved and respected. Once those needs are met, you want to feel good about yourself as far as that self-esteem. And once those needs are met, you work on and you're motivated for self-actualization, kind of being the best you can possibly be. Okay, that whole self-fulfillment thing. And in his theory, he was basically saying you can work for this, but you never really achieve it. Now, before he died, he basically recanted. Everybody has been into this, and he was saying it was a lockstep process, things like that. And before he died, he said, you know what? It's garbage. It doesn't work. Basically, people had not been able to replicate his research and get the same responses. Plus, they found that it's not a lockstep type of thing, and you can be motivated in a couple of places at the same time. For example, the company announces that there's going to be a downsizing, a bunch of layoffs. People are going to be motivated in a couple of places. First of all, safety. If I lose my job and I don't have income, how am I going to be able to pay the bills? And also esteem. In other words, feeling good about yourself. Why me? Sort of thing. The thing is, it makes a lot of sense in that people can understand what are the types of things that may be missing where somebody is motivated as far as their actions are concerned. McClellan's acquired needs basically is saying that there are three key things that motivate people. A desire for achievement. In other words, they're trying to achieve excellence. Affiliation, being with other people, having relationships. And then also power. What kind of influence and control do you have? And different things will motivate people to do what it is that they're doing based on what's most important to them. Some people, it's, for example, a researcher. One of the things that's really motivating them is the achievement aspect. You have somebody who is really trying to push and move into management. Maybe it's power. So there's going to be different needs that motivate different people. You have Deci and Ryan's self-determination theory. In other words, what that's saying is people are driven to grow and attain fulfillment. It is primarily based on intrinsic types of things. What they're saying here is there's three key things that are motivating folks. Competence, in other words, being able to achieve something. Autonomy, doing what it is that they want to do. And relatedness, in other words, that sense of belonging and being with others. Then you have Herzberg's two-factor theory. Frederick Herzberg was looking at a lot of things, and he said basically there are things that get people jazzed, get people motivated, and then there are things that just prevent dissatisfaction. The things that got people going, he called motivators. The things that prevented dissatisfaction, he called hygienes. Why he called them hygienes? I don't know. When I think of hygienes, I think of washing your hands. And so what you have is motivating factors, which are primarily intrinsic. In other words, things like achievement, recognition, doing cool work. If those things are not there, well, the person isn't really satisfied in the job. You give them the opportunity to do something cool, and that's when they really get jazzed. They really get motivated to do something. That's where the satisfaction comes into play. Hygiene factors are extrinsic. In other words, you add these things and it just keeps people from being dissatisfied. If you take them away or you don't provide them, that's when you get dissatisfaction. Hygienes are things like company policy, benefits, supervision, pay. A lot of people think pay is a motivator. No, it's actually a hygiene. Just because you might get a 15-cent an hour raise doesn't necessarily mean that all of a sudden you are just absolutely jacked up. You can't wait to come into work. But you take that 15 cents an hour away from folks, you're going to have a lot of pissed off people. Hygiene factors, you add these things, it just prevents dissatisfaction. You take them away, that's when you get a lot of dissatisfaction. Now, this makes a lot of sense. If you think about it, the things that are preventing people from being dissatisfied in their work are actually extrinsic types of things. But the things that get people really jacked up, ready to go out and do something really cool, is when they have these opportunities that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, problems with this theory. Herzberg was slammed for his research techniques. He basically used a critical incident method, and people thought that his where he was drawing his data from was too narrow. They said basically, Freddie, how can you make a theory like this and generalize it across a population based on 200 accountants in Pittsburgh? The thing is, it makes a heck of a lot of sense. Just because people had not been able to really replicate all of his findings, it makes a lot of sense when you step back and think about it. If you have an opportunity to really make a difference in somebody else's life, that may really jack up the satisfaction and motivation that you have. So this makes a heck of a lot of sense as far as I'm concerned. When you think about comparing the content theories to Maslow McClelland and Deci and Ryan are basically in these upper levels here. They're much more intrinsic. If you notice, these types of things here in Maslow are much more intrinsic. Down here are more extrinsic, and that's more along the lines of Herzberg's hygiene factors. So you can see how they kind of line up as far as these needs theories are concerned. Then you have process theories. In other words, how you do things, what kind of behaviors people are choosing. The theories that go along with this are equity, expectancy, and goal theory. Now, equity theory. Basically, with equity theory, what you're doing is you are comparing yourself to others. What is it that you do, and what is it that you get from it? With equity theory, you say, okay, what kind of inputs am I putting in? What am I getting from it? How much work am I doing? What kind of rewards am I getting? And we compare that to other people. If we find that, okay, it's cool, all right, what I'm putting in is equal to what somebody else is putting in, our rewards are the same, equity is perceived. That's cool. If you feel you're putting in more and not getting out as much as what somebody else is getting, they're getting more rewards than you are for doing less, you're going to be upset. And there's going to be inequity that is involved there. Feeling of inequity. And if there is that feeling of inequity, what tends to happen is people reduce their inputs. In other words, they'll leave early or come in late or take long lunches. They change the outputs or rewards that they receive. Maybe they start stealing some stuff, okay, to think, okay, let me get some of this because let me get some of mine out of this. In other words, they will do things if they feel they're not being treated as well as somebody else. There's inequity there. Now, if it goes the other way, in other words, you're comparing what it is that you put in, what you get out of it, to what somebody else does, and it's obvious you're getting more than they are. Well, you're not going to back off on anything. You're just going to gloat. So that's one of the issues that I have with equity theory. It basically works only one way. Justice theory is basically along the same lines, okay? What is it that's fair? What kind of justice is actually coming out with that? What happens as far as equity and justice, people's perceptions are what count. In other words, a person's perception is truth for them. And people want a voice as far as the decisions that are being made and things that impact them. And leader behavior matters. So there are some lessons that you can get from equity theory. Now, a guy by the name of Victor Vroom came up with what he called expectancy theory. Personally, I think he hit a home run with this. Basically, what expectancy theory is looking at is three things. Now, he called them expectancy, instrumentality, and valence, and he had ways of measuring them. When you sit down and really look at the theory, you can kind of simplify it. And I simplify it this way. I find it hard to kind of measure expectancy and valence and all this other stuff. The way I look at it is it's either there or it's not. It's a 1 or a 0. And it's like a math equation. Three things have to be available for someone to be motivated to do something. First of all, they have to believe that they can do it. Second of all, they have to believe that if they are successful in doing it, they get rewards. And third, they have to value the reward. And when we say value of the reward, it's not necessarily dollars or anything like that. It's how much that person values the reward that they would be getting. For example, it could be a feeling of satisfaction for a job well done. Maybe you have somebody who's a bricklayer. At the end of the day, the bricklayer steps back, looks at the wall that was built, feels really good about what was going on there. All three of these things have to be present in order for motivation to be there. For somebody to be motivated, all three of these things have to be there. It's like a math equation. If any one of these terms goes to 0, the result goes to 0. So you have to believe that you can do something. You have to believe that if you do it, you get the reward, and you have to value the reward. This makes a heck of a lot of sense. You can step back and think about why somebody is doing what they're doing. Why are they motivated to do this? What is it that's actually going on? If they are not doing what you're expecting, what is it that's missing? It could be the reward that they're actually looking for, or they don't believe that they would be rewarded. Why do some of this stuff if we're not going to get anything for it? So I think Vroom hit a home run with this. This makes, to me, a heck of a lot of sense. In using it, you want to think about what rewards people want, because everybody's going to be different. All right. How are you linking those rewards to the performance? Are you making sure that people can see that? And do they believe that you're actually going to give them the right rewards for things? Then you have goal setting theory. Basically, with goal setting theory is saying people will get motivated if they set a goal and then they work to achieve it. You have stretch goals. In other words, things that are really pushing as far as what it is you're trying to achieve. Learning goals and performance goals. With goal setting, there's some key things here. They need to be specific. They need to be necessary for, the conditions need to be necessary for goal setting to work. They need to be linked to actions and timeframes. When people think about setting goals, a lot of times they think about the acronym SMART. Specific, measurable, aligned, realistic, and timely. Now, I always use aligned with this. Some people will use achievable. To me, that's more of the realistic. I'm big on making sure that the goals that I set are aligned with overall organizational goals. If they're not, I'm working on the wrong stuff. So make sure that the goals that you set are SMART, specific, measurable, aligned, realistic, and timely. For example, somebody might say, okay, I want to lose weight. That's nothing but a wish. You have to make it much more specific. How much weight do you want to lose? Okay, I want to lose 10 pounds. Okay, that's also measurable. Okay, you can see and get on a scale and see 10 pounds. It has to be realistic. Not, I want to lose 10 pounds by 10 o'clock tonight, but, by the end of the month, I'd like to lose 10 pounds. And it needs to be timely. That whole idea of, okay, by the end of the month. So when you start thinking about goals, they really need to be specific as far as what it is you're trying to do. How do you measure it? Is it aligned with organizational goals? Are they realistic? Can you really achieve it, even if it is a stretch? And is it time bound? In other words, you have a date, not just whenever, but you have a date that it's going to be done by. Then you have job design perspectives. In other words, how are we making sure that people fit in the jobs that we're asking them to do? We've talked about this before, where you might make sure that there's a variety of things that people are doing. They can see the final product, what it is that they are doing and how it relates to the final product. And is it significant? And is it making a difference? If that's the case, you get meaningful work. People are motivated. Do they have the autonomy to do the things that they want to do when they do it? That's going to give you more motivation. Are you giving feedback, specific feedback, as far as what it is that they're actually doing? You're going to get motivation, more motivation. So the job characteristics model really does come into play, particularly these areas here, to get people cranked up as far as what it is that they're doing. Then you have reinforcement theory. All right, B.F. Skinner came up with this idea of operant conditioning. Many times you hear about classical conditioning. Okay, with the dog that you ring the bell and dog starts to slobber because they're expecting the food, things like that. That's classical conditioning. You're talking about animals. People are much more complicated. They have the ability to choose. And so what you're doing is you're looking at operant conditioning when you're dealing with people. Behavior modification. The main thing around reinforcement theory, catch people doing something right. The more that you can catch people doing something right and reinforce that, the higher the probability they will repeat that behavior. You have positive and negative reinforcement, extinction, and punishment. Now, positive reinforcement is basically rewarding somebody for what it is that they're doing. Hey, good job. I really appreciate it. Pat on the back sort of thing. Negative reinforcement is basically kind of avoiding what it is that they would want to get. In other words, okay, because you're doing better, you're working faster, I'm no longer nagging you. The thing is, negative reinforcement is still reinforcement. It is still increasing the chances the behavior will be repeated. Extinction is withholding any kind of rewards in order to reduce the behavior that you're trying to change. Punishment, reprimands, and discipline to reduce the chances that the behavior will be repeated. The main thing is the positive reinforcement. The more that you can catch people doing something right, the higher the probability they'll continue to work on those behaviors, and you'll get those in the future. In using reinforcement for people's motivation, positive reinforcement is really the desirable behavior. Okay? You want to give them as soon as possible and be clear about what behavior is needed. Punishment, try to stay away from it. Sometimes you have to, as far as reprimands, disciplinary actions, things like that. Many times, though, people are thinking, you may have won this battle, but you haven't won the war. The key is the positive reinforcement. Also, organizations will use compensation and non-monetary incentives to try to get people motivated for things. Monetary rewards as far as the compensation, non-monetary things like your work-life balance and your schedules, your vacation times, finding meaning, doing cool work, things like that. Some of the incentive plans that are popular pay for performance. In other words, here are the goals I have. You achieve those goals, you get your bonus. Piece rate. In other words, you get X number of dollars or X number of cents for every piece that you do. Sales commissions. In other words, you make a sale, you get X% of the sale. Bonuses, profit sharing, stock options. So all of these things come into play when you're trying to provide compensation and help people stay motivated. Some of the non-monetary ways of motivating folks, your work-life balance. In other words, what are you doing as far as giving people some of the opportunities to adjust their schedule? What about their well-being? What kind of benefits are you providing? Things like this. And one of the key things is providing meaningfulness in work. In other words, being able to see how you're making a difference as far as the organization and in people's lives. This really does help get people excited about what they're doing. These are some of the key points from the chapter. If you have questions, give me a shout.